Hey guys! Whew! Oh man, am I glad we got that done. Holy shit. Okay, here's the deal with this video. This one will involve a lot of your previous requests via social media, comments, etc. Basically every album on this list someone has requested in some capacity. And then the next video you guys will see, more than likely, will be a Patreon Catch-Up Quickie, full of Patreon requests. Again, I hate to leave you Patreon peeps hanging, but someone requested the new Jimmy World, so I have a little bit of time to wait until that one comes out. Coolio? Alright. And if that doesn't liven up your spirits, then maybe this will. On this particular Catch-Up Quickie, I'm just gonna spoil something for ya. We don't have a single bad album on it. No, really, all of the stuff you guys requested, none of it was really what I'd call bad. I sincerely appreciate that, but to be fair, some of the stuff I probably didn't like as much as the rest of you. Hell, some of this stuff is getting way more praise than it deserves, frankly. But overall, we don't have any massive piss takers, and that's always good to see. So for those of you that want reviewer rage, just watch Ratatouille again, I guess. I don't know, you're not gonna find a lot of that here. For now, let's get cheery. You know, I wasn't too sure what to expect from the new Touche Amore. Am I saying that right, by the way? It looks like Touche Amore. Anyway, I'd heard Parting the Sea Between Brightness and Me and always kept a loose eye on them since then. I mean, I dug what they were doing, but I was far from like a super fan or anything. I honestly don't know what it was that kept me from falling head over heels for these guys, but I think with stage 4, I finally found myself able to move from Touche to Amore. When I first heard Skyscraper, I loved it, but thought this was way too atmospheric and soft of a sound for this band to be creating. But then when the whole album came out, it ended up sounding like this, and I still ended up loving it. Hey, shows what I know, me. Huh. As a whole, the album cranks things down a bit. The guitars and bass aren't nearly as fuzzy or crunchy overall. They go for a more clean feeling sound, but the drums are still played exquisitely tightly. And Jeremy Bolm's vocals are still mostly shouty and intense. He's got a terrific style that blends spoken word poetry with hardcore, borderline screamo shouting, which you'd think wouldn't work against the mellower, cleaner, scaled down melodies, but life finds a way, and so does Jeremy Bolm. You know, the spoken word style delivery and softer touch kind of reminds me of another band, Me Without You, if you've heard of them. But at the risk of burning away any possible hipster cred I may possibly have left, I fucking hate Me Without You! Me Without You is one of the most pretentious fucking bands I've ever heard, and I've seen them live twice, so ugh. But this album sounds pretty much exactly what I wished Me Without You sounded like. It has exquisite melodies, exquisite vocals, and it doesn't enjoy the smell of its own farts. I can recommend this album strongly. That is, I mean, if you haven't already shot a hole in your monitor after hearing me talk smack about them without talent. It's a different spin on the whole Touche formula, but if you haven't given these guys a try, this might be the perfect album to help ease you into their music. It's great stuff. Go give it a shot. Stage 4 gets 4.5 stages out of 5. Holy fucking shit, did I get a bajillion requests to cover this? God! As many requests as I got and as much hype as I heard swirling around about this album, you'd think the damn thing cured cancer or came packaged with blowjobs or something. In fact, I'm still not 100% certain all the hype I heard from other people surrounding this album didn't just instantly taint my opinion right there. I mean, some of you act like this album is the next coming of Christ, Cobain, and Bowie at the same time. Like, chill, people. Which kind of makes me dread having to tell you good people that I love so much for subscribing and donating to the Patreon and supporting the show, and etc., that this album is not that fucking good. It's not that it's bad. I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, there aren't any bad albums on this quickie, and I did get some enjoyment out of it. The vocalist reminds me a lot of Brian Sella from the Front Bottoms. He's got a laid-back kind of vocal delivery that I do enjoy, and the music does remind me of a more amped up, modern pop-punk kind of vibe. It's almost like a weird hybrid of Front Bottoms, stuff like Joyce Manor, and maybe a dash of Wonder Years thrown in. It's certainly not bad. But a funny thing happened every time I tried to listen to this album. I usually do a lot of review listening while I'm working at my day job, which might sound a little like I'm not giving the music the proper respect it deserves! But A, shut up, and B, it actually does help serve as a nice barometer for how much the music is actually engaging me. Does it just idly sit in the background and not make much of a peep? Does it wow me so much that my production quota begins to suffer? Or does it put me to sleep at my desk and bring me one step closer to the unemployment line? Seriously, I nearly got shit-canned after the last of Mice and Men. And every time I tried to listen to this album, something would inevitably draw my attention away from it, and I would immediately forget what I was listening to. Hell, I had trouble even finishing the damn thing. It probably took me a month before I could coax myself to sit all the way through it. And guys, while it's not bad, it also just doesn't do much to impress. I'm sorry, but this thing doesn't do much that I haven't heard better before in other places. I mentioned that the vocalist sounds like the guy from Front Bottoms, and as the singer yelped a chorus that refused to get stuck in my head, I just wondered why I wasn't listening to them instead. I mentioned the music reminded me of Joyce Manor, and instead of humming the melodies, I would think, oh yeah, they're coming out with a new one too. I hope that one turns out to be good. Wait, who is this again? If this album is your jam of the year, then hey, don't let me rain on your parade. Again, it isn't bad for what it is. It's competent enough, but that's all I see in it. Competence. This didn't exactly invoke the love of the Holy Spirit into me. I'm sorry. Holy Ghost gets 3 bands that just kinda did this better. Out of 5. Oh man, I can already tell some of you are pissed at me for that one. Hey, look, don't feel too bad about it. Have a drink, take a deep breath, maybe post a shitty profanity-laden comment in the comment section. Go ahead, man. If that makes you feel better, this one's on me. But like I say, the only opinion that really matters is your own, and Modern Baseball just appears to be one of those bands that just doesn't do much for me. Hey, believe me, when you've been around as long as I have, sometimes you have to go against the grain and just admit that the thing that everyone else likes just isn't your jam. And hell, with these guys, I've had to be that guy for over 20 years, so imagine how hard my head must hurt from having so many empty liquor bottles chucked at it. Again, it's not that Garbage is a bad group. Quite the contrary, their eclectic mix of shoegaze, rock, and electronica can really be quite stunning at times. And Shirley Manson's got a sweet, smoky set of pipes that can melt you right into the floor with the proper delivery. Hell, this album in particular has some really strong moments. Songs like Empty, Even Though Our Love Is Doomed, and Magnetized are absolute corkers. And this album did have some moments on it where I was genuinely enthralled. But that's the thing about my relationship to Garbage. Boy, I hope my ex doesn't hear that sentence and take it out of context. I can only enjoy this band in moments. I can really only stomach so much of it at a time. Even though I'd say every Garbage album has its moments, I just have trouble sitting through an entire album of this stuff. Even if it is choice, I compare Garbage to a fine cognac. And guys, I love me some cognac. It's smooth and sweet with just the right amount of bite, both in its general approach and in the impression it leaves on you. But if I drink too much of it, I just get kinda sick, you know? I did enjoy this album for what it was, though. If you're a Garbage fan, or even if you haven't listened to Garbage in a long time, I say give it a spin. There's a good chance you'll probably really enjoy this one. Or at least you'll probably enjoy it better than I do. Again, that's more just a matter of taste. It's good for what it is. Strange Little Birds gets 3.5 guys who can't hold their liquor. Out of 5. How about we switch from liquor to caffeine? Holy shit, the new Descendents is so goddamn good. Ah! Oh man, you guys know that Descendents is right up my alley. A classic punk band from back in the day that refuses to compromise and is relentlessly aggressive and intense with a snarky, cynical bite to the lyrics and a sound that is just as much worthy of analyzing on a technical level as it is to just throw off your shirt and jump to the motherfucking pit to. In the immortal words of Kurt Vonnegut Jr., that's my shit. And guys, the new album is so good too. It's on that Milo goes to college, I don't want to grow up, and everything sucks level. Remember how in my Green Day review I bitched so much, on reflection probably too much, about Mike fucking Dearnt's lackluster bass performance? Well, I think some of that may have just been due to me being spoiled rotten by the licks on this album. Oh my god, Carl Alvarez is just flying up and down that fretboard like his fingers are covered in butter. These licks are damn sick, amigos, and Milo's lyrics are as biting, fiery, and caustic as ever, from his railing against dude bro culture and on paper and testosterone, to songs like Business AU and Human Being that cry out against mundanity and desensitization, to the frankly excellent stab in the throat to the pharmaceutical industry, Limiter. God, between this and NoFX's Oxymoronic, this year has been great for telling Big Pharma to go fuck itself. Oh, guys, this album, more so than any other album on this list, scratched the hell out of my punk itch this year, and it's got a nice, cozy spot, all but secured on my top 10 Best of the Year list. Maybe it doesn't do too much outside of the usual Descendents norm, but it's 21 tracks of pure, concentrated, unadulterated punk rock fun. Hell, I don't even think I can say that about the new Green Day. This music is exquisitely played, the vocals are pertinent and meaningful, and given the Descendents' near 40 years as a band, it's nice to see that even after all this time, they can still amaze. Fuck, I sincerely hope I'm this hardcore when I'm 40. Hypercaffium Spazzinate gets 5 5-hour energy drinks out of 5. Oh my god, Skillet! I've been looking for a chance to talk about this band for the longest damn time. Guys, Skillet are no joke one of my favorite Christian rock bands. Seriously, stuff like Collide and Comatose aren't just good albums for a Christian band, they're straight up modern classics, and I bet I'm getting some funny looks from people right now. Look, if you're into that more mainstream style of power rock, then Skillet more often than not knows how to deliver. And regardless of what you think of their song crafting abilities or their general sound, Lori Peters? Seriously, this band might not be everyone's cup of tea, I get that, but if you're open-minded to their sound, they can really wow you. I've been aching for a chance to fanboy out and tell you guys how fucking awesome and amazing this group is. I just wish it hadn't been for this album. Oh, it had to be this album. That's my penance for being pokey. Again, I'm not breaking my rule here. This album is still what I would consider good, but and does it just barely squeak by. Jen Ledger has served as a fairly decent replacement since Peters left the group in 2008, but she's just not doing much on this album. The drums are really weak here. They lack a certain passion. No, the other kind, that Skillet's sound is known for. And the heavy use of programmed drums on this album is really kind of off-putting. In fact, the whole quasi-electronica vibe this album has going on, I'm not into it. To put it in respectable Christian language, it's a bit ill-advised. And to put it in not-so-Christian terms, it's fucking silly titties. This album kind of reminded me of Alien Youth to some extent, which you old fart Skillet fans will probably see as a positive, but I'm the one old school fan that actually doesn't fucking like Alien Youth, so for me, this album just dragged up a lot of bad memories. It also doesn't help that this thing contains what has to be one of the stupidest songs they've ever written, and these were the same fuckers that wrote Hey You, I Love Your Soul, so Famous. A song about wanting to make Jesus famous. Make Jesus famous. No joke, I first heard this song while driving through a neighborhood that had no fewer than 3 churches in it. Look, I get it, you're a Christian band. That basically means job number 1 is serving as PR reps for your carpenter boss's savioring side project. But Jesus couldn't be any more famous if he were personally sponsored by McDonald's. The metaphor is crazy flimsy here, peeps. But if you're into the later style of Skillet, the stuff from Awake and beyond, I don't think this is gonna kill your love for the band or anything. Despite its crappier moments, it was still able to shine through in places like Feel Invincible and Out of Hell. But would I recommend this as someone's first exposure to Skillet? Hell no. Most people would say go pick up Comatose. I'm going to tell you to go pick up Collide, but we're both right. I get that this album probably sounds the way it does because people were saying their sound was getting homogenous, but digging back into the electronica pool to kind of resolve those complaints, guys, leave the spiky haircuts back in the 90s if you don't mind, eh? Unleashed gets 3 hipster Jesuses out of 5. Ugh, all this electronica and punk. How about we tear our shirts off and oil up the old muscles for some metal? Yeah, that new Gojira, French metal, Les Bois! Gojira is one of those bands that the metal scene absolutely loves to put on a high pedestal, and believe me, I certainly don't blame them. Their riffing and song crafting is some of the best out there, and they make for a very heady, weighty listen. It's something you can mosh to, but also something you can dig deeper into if you really want to relax and try to break it down beyond the wahs, if you know what I mean. And I do love a band that can do that, and while the new Gojira is still mighty fine music, I found myself having an issue with it. Maybe it's just me, but this album feels a bit sludgier, a bit more stoic than some of their other releases. It's got a slow, dirty approach to its riffs, and it's got a chugging nature to its tempo and beat structure. It's an album that tries to feel colossal and gigantic as its waves of sound crush against your eardrums, and it just wasn't doing quite as much for me as I was expecting it to. I mean, I wasn't necessarily bored by it or anything, but this album almost had Modern Baseball's problem, albeit to a much lesser degree. For some reason, I just had trouble settling into its groove. After I spun it and admittedly enjoy it the first 2 or 3 times, I didn't have much desire to listen to it again. God, do you ever have that problem when an album leaves an okay or even a good taste in your mouth, but the thought of spinning it again comes up and you just can't talk your brain into doing it? I think the more methodical approach wasn't poorly executed or unintentional. I mean, Magma isn't exactly known for its expedience, But after several listens, the goals that this album set out to achieve, I think they achieved them rather splendidly. I just feel like, I feel like I had more fun with L'Enfant Sauvage. God, I know I messed that up. And From Mars to Sirius. It's not a bad album, not at all. If you're a Gojira fan, then of course you need to pick this up. It's good, but is it album of the year material? Maybe for some, but it still has a lot of growing to do on me yet. Magma gets 3.5 growing pains out of 5. Billy Talent. Now here's a band I have more of a concrete opinion on, and that opinion is yay! Billy Talent were one of those much music bands from my early teen years that helped me get into a lot of other awesome Canadian acts. Stuff like Alexis on Fire, Our Lady Peace, Tragically Hip, and like 1,000 other great bands. Seriously, I should just do a video on Canadian bands someday. But I've been listening since their first self-titled, and I'd say most of their catalog has been pretty solid. Well, most of their catalog, that is. Talent has been on somewhat of a slippery slope lately. With every passing album, they seem to get just that much more bland and that much more forgettable. I mean, truth be told, I probably couldn't name you a single song off of Dead Silence if I tried. So obviously my biggest question here was, is this going to be another layer of bland icing spread over what was once a delicious layer cake? And thankfully the answer to that question is no. This album does a lot of things right. Its melodies and hooks are super catchy, a lot of them being instantly infectious. Songs like the title track, Ghost Ship of Cannibal Rats, and Time Bomb Ticking Away get themselves stuck in your head right quick. And some of the slower songs like Rabbit Down the Hole and the title track's Reprise were interesting enough to mix the formula up and help keep it from getting too stale. There's a lot of great riffage and some nice, if not more restrained vocal melodies on this album. I mean, take it from a vocalist, guys, you can only do stuff like "What you say is what you get!" for so long until your throat just says fuck you and quits, you know what I mean? And I'd say that Alexis on Fire drummer Jordan Hastings is doing an excellent job filling in for Aaron Solowaniuk. I tried. Keeping things bouncy and tight, you know, like he usually does. He does an excellent job here. All that having been said, the album does kinda still suffer from the trappings of later talent, in that it does just kinda lose its steam after a while, but this album took about 8 tracks before it started feeling that way. With Dead Silence, it was more like 4 or 5, but it's still a solid release that stands on its own 2 feet, and I'm always happy to see Billy Talent producing kick-ass music. If you heard the singles to this and liked what you heard, yeah, totally pick this one up. Afraid of Heights gets 4 Ian DeSaw flat tops out of 5. Whew, man, you guys were really chomping at the bit for my take on this album. Then again, the only person I can blame for that is, well, me. I gave Common Courtesy Album of the Year back in 2013. Wow, 2013? Has it really been that long? Jesus. And, you know, even though I had this stupid grading system where I only included albums that I'd reviewed on the show and whatnot, I still think that album is pretty much the best thing that came out of that year. Except for Tegan and Sarah, of course. The guys had so much ferocity, so much melody, so much to prove on that release that it was a downright inspiring piece of post-hardcore. It practically defines what a modern post-hardcore album should sound like. I still spin it from time to time, and I always enjoy it. Which would probably make you think I was eager like a rocky little beaver to get my paws on this one, right? Well, here's the thing. Common Courtesy is almost too good. It's too good for its own good. Even when I went back and explored the band's back catalog and got to know them a little better, all I could think was there is no way they are going to be able to top this, unless their next album solves world hunger and makes Donald Trump spontaneously combust. There's just no way this album is going to be able to top this, and sadly they haven't on Bad Vibrations. Okay guys, look, how many times do I have to remind you, there aren't any bad releases on this review, okay? And I meant it. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. The band decided to lean heavier on this release, tapping into their more metallic side than their pop-punkier roots. It opens with songs like the title track, Paranoia, and Exposed, just snarling at you with sharp, metallic teeth. Hell, with the exception of Naivety, a song that sounds almost ripped straight out of Alkaline Trio's playbook, the first half of this album is just relentlessly heavy. It doesn't shift towards their more melodious side until about halfway through, with tracks like Justified and We Got This. And to be honest, I'm not sure I like this approach. For one thing, the heavy, melodious mix of sounds was one of the things I admired most about Common Courtesy. But on this album, the genial neighbors of melody and heaviness don't seem to be getting along quite as well, because there's a great big wall gating the two off from each other. Jesus, this election is just tearing everyone apart, isn't it? This approach kinda makes the album feel a touch lopsided, and it fucks with the album's overall flow. Not to mention the riffs from Paranoia feel like they're lifted almost note for note from the eco-terrorist in me. I'm not saying Rise Against should sue, but I feel like some compensation might be in order here. It's not the near flawless masterpiece that Common Courtesy was, but then again, it was never going to be that good. Despite its problems, overall, I'd still say it holds its own fairly well. Again, that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy it. It's fine. It's perfectly serviceable. But it just pales in comparison to its predecessor, and especially this year when there's so much stiff competition out there. I mean, not to give everyone a bad vibration, but I don't even think I've got a spot in the top 10 for this album. I mean, not this year. Guys, look at the competition. There's just no fucking way. Bad Vibrations gets 4 naiveties out of 5. It's pronounced naivety. Naivety.
Rally, make some fucking noise!
Okay, here we go. This band was also way up there on my album of the year list for last year. Hell, this thing was number 1 on my Critical Condition best of list for like the entire year. Until those 2 albums came along, but this was another instance where I was afraid this thing wasn't going to be able to top the previous effort, simply because the previous effort was just so goddamn yummy. Ooh, damn, son. I mean, the title alone was worrying enough, given that for a band that's so excellent with tempo and precision, they apparently forgot how to count to 4, and this album also has the ever so frightening distinction of being released within only a year of its counterpart. If anybody's been burned by that little chestnut, it's me, so I was a little wary of this release, but thankfully my fears were unfounded. In fact, I think I may like this album a bit better than Alpha and Omega. It has its loud, crazy moments on tracks like The Price Is Wrong, Motor Mouth, and Habitual Line Stepper, but also some glorious, smooth, and melodious peak points like The Way the News Goes, Catch Fire, and Lune. Oh god, Lune. Or maybe it's Loon, I don't know, but it's great. I'd say on the whole this album is probably a bit more fierce than Alpha and Omega, well, Alpha at least, but it's much more well-balanced, and it has a much greater sense of flow and cohesion than Bad Vibrations does. Is it fair to compare this album to that one? Not at all, but this album is a better example of that heavier edged, mixed in with pleasant melody, pulled off way more effectively. And again, we get some top-notch musical construction from the group, too. Misha, Jake, and Mark's guitar and synth work is gorgeously arranged, striking a perfect balance between crunchy and blissful. Spencer's beautiful tenor is as gorgeous as it always is, and it's sure to piss off even more of the true cult metal piss babies, as it always does. God, that always makes me love him even more. And Matt Halpern's drumming is easily one of the best things on this album. Man, the beats he is laying down are just insane. If Rock Band were still a thing, these songs would definitely be on extreme mode. No difficulty selection here, this stuff is intense. Overall, the album feels a lot tighter and leaner than Alpha and Omega did, and I think something like this would be a much easier introductory experience to the band than something like the Juggernaut albums, but Periphery have fucking killed it again on this release, and I'd say they're another solid contender for that album of the year I keep bringing up. Holy fuck, I officially have way too many albums to pick from, seriously. I mean, I guess that's a good problem to have, but yeesh. Select difficulty gets 5 hard modes out of 5. Okay, if somebody from the future came to my past self and told me that the one kinda whiny, kinda immature emo band that I didn't like very much would end up releasing one of my favorite albums of 2014, I probably would have done one of 2 things. Punch them in the face for being a liar, or hypothesizing some kind of horrifying apocalypse where only cockroaches and Hot Topics survived. But I will be damned if Happiness Is didn't knock me on my ass. I loved it. I still love it. I still spin it from time to time. But walking into this one certainly had me skeptical. Remember, I was never a TBS faithful. To me, they always felt like a singles band. One of those groups that focuses on writing 2 or 3 good songs and then stuffs the rest of their albums with filler and stupidly ridiculous song titles. Happiness Is was the first album I enjoyed from back to front, but I couldn't help but feel like it might have been a fluke, or that they would cave to pressure from their fans asking to hear something more like the old sound, which, not always mind, but more often than not is just code speak for, I just want to feel young again! Make an album that reminds me of the days before student loan payments, receding hairlines, and stretch marks. Wah! Happiness Is was the band stepping outside of their comfort zone, and I was afraid they wouldn't have the courage to stick to their guns. But thankfully that is so not the case here. Damn, Tidal Wave is good. Hell, I think I like it even better than Happiness Is. I mean, it's a hell of a lot less depressing than that album, for one. Kinda ironic title the more I dwell on it. The lyrics are a touch more positive, with Adam Lazzara apparently having a much better year than he did last time around. Good to hear, man. I was starting to get worried about you, dude. And the instrumentation takes a much more clean and refined approach. The guitars are more reverb and chorus heavy, much more saturated and bright than the dour crunchiness of the previous album. Again, the music as well as the lyrics put forth a bit more of a hopeful face, and given that Happiness Is actually ended up performing better than a lot of people expected, I guess they have good reason to be in a more chipper mood this time around. You know, TDS feel like they're more open to trying different things and expanding their sound, and kind of expanding the definition of what Taking Back Sunday can be, and I'm goddamn thrilled to hear that. I wouldn't be surprised if part of that had to do with them getting away from the major labels. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't be surprised these guys didn't innovate much while they were being dictated by the same jagoffs responsible for Batman Arkham Origins. Guys, Taking Back Sunday is going through a second renaissance right now. Their sound is not only good compared to their old standards, I feel like it surpasses it greatly, and this is coming from a guy who didn't give two flying shits about them back in the day. The thing that worries me is that so many people just, think of them as that band they were listening to when they got their first finger bang. They just write them off as a childhood band. Look, people, dig their last two albums up, because this band has grown the fuck up, even if you fucking haven't. Tidal Wave gets 4.5 rose-tinted glasses out of 5. Oh, for fuck's sake, both A Day to Remember and Against Me released albums this year? Christ, 2 previous Album of the Year winners having to duke it out at the same time. God, I guess I should just be glad Slater-Kinney or Lamb of God didn't release albums in 2016, though that certainly would have helped cheer us up. Ugh. But yeah, guys, of course I was hyped for this. Against Me has always been an outstanding band, but the tragic trip through Laura Jane Grace's gender transition that brought us Gender Dysphoria Blues bumped them into the highest echelon of rock royalty, in my opinion. This album was monumental. It's a landmark, which, yeah, gave me the same dread I had with Periphery and A Day to Remember. How's that for bad vibrations, eh? How the hell are you gonna live up to this? I knew right away that this album was not going to live up to the masterwork of TGD, but I'll be damned if it doesn't go for broke regardless. The album has a bit of a different slant here. As opposed to being more politically charged or taking on some kind of concept, this album comes pretty much straight from a personal place. This album is about heartache, about longing, about disappointment, yearning, and regret. I read an article in Rolling Stone about the making of this album, and in that article, Laura Jane stated that a lot of this album centers around her previous marriage, and how her transition led to the fallout of that previous relationship. And on songs like Boyfriend, Crash, and Haunting Haunted Haunts, yeah, you really feel that pain she's laying down. It's a much more straight from the heart experience. Maybe even more so than Transgender Dysphoria Blues. Remember, most of that album is draped behind a character concept. But here, man, this album is Laura, and it comes from the most personal of places. I almost feel like I'm leafing through the pages of her diary here. I feel like I should put this album away before I get my ass kicked, you know what I mean? And this album, from a musical perspective, isn't quite as hammering or anthematic as its predecessor. It's more scaled down in places. Adam Willard isn't bringing quite the same thunder as he was last time. Grace and James Bowman's riffs aren't quite as bright and crisp. Everything has a bit of a muddier, darker, a more sour feel to it. But again, given a lot of the themes on this album, I feel like this was done intentionally, and I think it works. The sound really helps convey the feelings of uncertainty, confusion, doubt, and personal misery. It's not a happy album by even the slightest stretch, but it still makes for some goddamn fine listening. And while this album does have the unenviable duty of standing in the shadow of Transgender Dysphoria Blues, it's still a ripping great Against Me album, one that totally deserves your time and attention. Again, despite the high pedigree it has to live up to, I feel like this album stands on its own, and it deserves your attention. It's still another great release that you shouldn't deny yourself the pleasure of taking in this year. Come on, Shapeshift with me. What have you got to lose? Fuck it. Shapeshift with me gets 5 dittos out of 5. Well, we're about near the end of another Catch-Up Quickie. And to those of you that know Protocol, you know somewhere around here I would usually talk about a really bad album before jumping into the best of the bunch. I originally listened to King 810's latest, walking into it with an open mind, granted, but ultimately thinking that it would probably take the unhallowed spot, just given their previous release, you know what I mean? But the album I sat through ended up being so bad. So abortively awful, miserable, wretched, and outright fucking deplorable that I didn't so much want to negatively review it as smother the fucking thing in gasoline and drop a match. It's so fucking bad, I feel fucking awful even talking about it. The only reason I even bring it up is because listening to this garbage pile of insecurity and hate is what inadvertently led me to discovering the next band. And look, any review I could attempt to write on this fucking thing would just be me rephrasing the ROLLINS band classic hit Civilized. So if you want my review of this atrocious cunt of an album, just listen to that song. I might go into further detail when this thing wins the top spot on my worst of the year list, but fuck this album and fuck this band. Now let's talk about something that's awesome instead, shall we? See, after listening to that abortion pressed to plastic, I needed something bright, sunny, and cheery to help stop me from transmogrifying into Werner Herzog and becoming a cynical spokesman for Arby's. So what did I dig up on Spotify? Baby metal, of course. Hey, happy, sunshiny, heavy, there we go. But Spotify led me down another rabbit hole with its recommended artist list, and sure enough, I stumbled upon this band. When I noticed that they had an album released this year, I figured, what could it possibly hurt? And god damn! Japan, why the hell have you been keeping this secret from us, hey? Holy shit, these guys are fucking amazing! Their unique blend of gorgeous electronica and crunchy, heavy riff work makes for an absolutely spellbinding listen. To fans of bands like Pierce the Veil, Bring Me the Horizon, Sleeping with Sirens, or Dance Gavin Dance, it's like those bands except to the 1000th degree and super Japanese. The addition of the more J-poppy elements to their sound makes their music so goddamn rich and full. Heracles never wastes a minute of time, and it's insanely good. The guitars are way more intricate and complex than you would normally expect in this genre of music. We're still a long way from Van Halen, but when compared to stuff like Of Mice and Men and Falling in Reverse, it's fucking leagues ahead of that shit. And their vocalist, Sashiro X, along with the other guys, sing and harmonize so damn effectively. They're terrific singers and performers. Granted, auto-tune does help with that. I mean, if you're an absolute anti-auto-tune purist, this thing will probably make you puke into your ramen. But as for me, I've never been against the use of auto-tune. I just don't think it serves as a replacement for actual talent and ability, like some bands do, but these guys still have more than enough to carry themselves on their own accord. A band like Asking Alexandria couldn't survive without this shit. A band like this is better because of how well they round off their edges with it. Not that the album doesn't have a few stray rough edges, mind, the most notable thing being that, well, there is a fair amount of English here and there. I mean, even the band's name looks like it's trying to say something in our language, but isn't quite there, you know? And like a lot of Japanese rock and pop, it does spice some English lyrics into the mix, but I couldn't find any song translations for these guys, and the lyrics on their own suggest that these guys don't have the greatest grip on the language. But hell, neither do baby metal, and that doesn't stop them from being outstanding. But if you just can't stand the possibility of an all your bass are belong to us moment in your rock music, it might set you off a wee bit. It was hard to find any supplementary material on this band, or at least anything I could read, you know what I mean? Folks, Google Translate can only carry us so far, but from what I can gather, these guys are still relatively small. Their Facebook page only has 2,000 likes, they don't have a Wikipedia entry yet, at least not in English, and guys, this is a band that deserves way more hype. Hell, these guys should be touring with acts like Sleeping with Sirens and Pierce the Veil. Fuck that, they should be headlining. This is some of the best stuff in their particular genre. It's colorful, it's vibrant, it's rich, it's pleasant, and it's just outstandingly executed. I didn't know the genre could get this good, but guys, believe. Seriously. You want to know the best part about all this ranting and raving? And Heracles isn't even their best album.
God damn, son!
Guys, forgive me for saying this yet again, but this album, yeah, it's got a damn solid chance of finding its way into my top 10. I'd say this one's pretty damn high, too. If there were any album I recommend you pick up from any of the albums I've listed on this video, yeah, it would be this one. Heracles gets 5 English translations out of 5.